Let me just start off by saying if you're going to attend a convention and you're dressed up or cosplaying as Deadpool, just stop, okay? We will literally arrest you on site. The FBI, we're going to have a SWAT team on standby and they will definitely tackle your ass to the ground. Obviously, I'm totally joking, guys, but literally, I think the video that I saw for this event for last year, I believe like 90% of the people there were dressed up as either Spider-Man or Deadpool. So hopefully people decide to switch it up. But regardless, I'm going to try to do something that honestly I had put off for the longest time. But I wanted to go through as many San Diego Comic-Con exclusive collectibles that I possibly could for the year of 2024. I may miss out on some stuff. It's a lot to cover. It's a lot to go through. So I know we're not technically going through every single collectible out in the market right now, but I'm going to try to cover at least like 80% of it, which I think is already quite a bit of a feat. If you guys have ever followed the channel, you guys will know that my content usually stays at like the 7 to 8 minute mark because I'm just too lazy to edit a giant video, and today might be like the biggest task that I've ever had for the channel. So let's get straight into it. I've already wasted enough saliva. I've wasted enough of your time. Let's get into the first little round of collectibles, and I wanted to get into the Hasbro stuff. Obviously, the first, or probably the biggest collectible that has gotten announced thus far, I believe, has to be that Death Head action figure, which is supposed to be, like I said, a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. It will retail for about $39.99. I know we've already technically received one Death Head, but this is kind of like a newer version. If I'm not mistaken, this was from like the 90s. I could be wrong. There's a lot of retooling here, and what's really surprising when it comes down to this particular exclusive is that usually we don't get new characters. Sometimes we get some like alternate color schemes, maybe some extra accessories. Sometimes it's just as simple as like new box art. That's it. But for this particular figure, we are getting, even though it's retooling of like, I believe is like the Colossus figure, there is some new sculpt work around like the chest pieces, and obviously the armor pieces and the head sculpt are all brand new. Now, I have also been reading some people saying that this is a Ronin the Accuser body mold, so I'm not 100% sure. I don't own the Accuser action figure, but it really doesn't matter. It's kind of a retool of an existing body mold, and it's essentially a brand new figure, something that Hasbro really does not do. It will come with 4 hands total, a shield, and then 3 alternate weapons that you can display him with. This is definitely a heavy hitter. A lot of people are very interested in this. From my understanding, there will be a very small limited quantity available through Hasbro Pulse. Let's be honest, we probably won't be able to get this figure. It's really painful. Like I said, usually if it's like an alternate color scheme on an action figure, or if it's something minimal, people will not pay too much attention. But when it's essentially a brand new figure, it really hurts. So keep an eye on this if you guys are interested. Like I said, it will run for $39.99. And this is the first time, I believe, in quite some time that Hasbro will actually have the figures available at the convention venue. So you will still have to like reserve a time slot and everything, but you can actually pick the figures up there. And then, like I said, a small amount will be available online as well. Next up, we have the Once a Man Cobra Commander G.I. Joe action figure from Hasbro. You have the commander himself, an alternate head sculpt, a mid-transition Cobra, 6 hands total, a pistol, a knife, and then a holster for the gun that he has, which can be ported onto his back. And yes, it will come with a premium price tag. You're looking at $39.99. Keep in mind the packaging is specific to the San Diego Comic-Con event. It's supposed to have like a lenticular effect to it, and very similar to what Hasbro does pretty consistently with their releases for San Diego Comic-Con. This is going to have a flap, so you'll be able to open up the flap and actually take a look at the figure on the inside, and then the lenticular image will be on the inner part of the flap. I'm not sure if the outside will have it as well, but regardless, it's a really cool effect. And I think this being a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, it coming with a few extra accessories, I can definitely see the price point, even though it's a little bit high, but it's not too bad. $39.99 if you want to pick this up. Like I said, it should be available at the time of the event for a very short time if you are trying to pick it up from home. Lastly, Hasbro will be offering a deluxe Darth Maul as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, and if I'm not mistaken, this is supposed to just be somewhat of a retooling or a reuse of that triple pack that's a GameStop exclusive that comes with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. However, this version of Darth Maul will have the soft cloth around the legs area, so in the lower torso, just so it's easier for the figure to be able to actually sit down on the speeder. It will come with a droid control bracelet, the speeder itself, a probe droid, and then a binocular accessory. The packaging looks absolutely brilliant, very reminiscent of what these figures were being packaged in back in like the late 90s to early 2000s. It is a great set. Just keep in mind, unlike the other figures that we've mentioned so far as San Diego Comic-Con exclusives, this particular set is going to run you about $60, so definitely a much higher price point. It does come with quite a bit, but I think it's a matter of personal perspective. Everybody will have to make their own choice on this one. It is quite of a hefty price, but then again, you are receiving quite a bit of accessories. Not to mention, if you don't want to buy the triple pack because you already have a Qui-Gon and an Obi-Wan, this could be an alternate buy, so you could try to pick this up, and then if you can't, just settle for the triple pack. Regardless, this will also be available at the same time as the other two collectibles from Hasbro, and they will also be available at the respective booth at the event. Moving on to NECA, and probably the most exciting figure that got announced, and I believe these already went up for pre-order, but they will also be, I think, available at the convention. Don't quote me on that, but we do have the Feral Camel Reveal Predator from the Prey film, which, if I'm not mistaken, was a Hulu exclusive. Also, don't quote me on that, but it was a really good movie. I really love this figure, and if I remember correctly, this scene is supposed to be based on that sequence where he's fighting the bear. And even though there is a moment where I think the bear would have won if the Predator hadn't gone into his invisible camo mode, but regardless, he does wreck the bear. He like holds it up on top of him, and then blood splatters down, so you can kind of see a little bit of an outline of the Predator. Now, I have said this before, but I think it's worth reiterating. I like NECA. It's not like my favorite OM out there. They usually do a phenomenal job in terms of sculpt work and attention to detail, but their articulation is always incredibly subpar and very disappointing. Now, it does have a deluxe price point of $39.99, but it will include a plethora of different accessories. You have a bone mask, a bear trap, a wolf's head, as well as the wolf's spine. It will also include a bomb, a medical device, a hatchet, a flintlock pistol, a wolf skull, a magnetic backpack, some wrist blades, as well as a gauntlet, as well as some interchangeable hands and mandibles. And in case you guys are wondering if I was reading this off of the website, of course I was. I'm not going to memorize all that. It does come incredibly packed, so that $40 price point really doesn't seem that outrageous, especially considering that I think the regular versions of these Predator NECA action figures usually retail for about $34.99, $37.99 in some cases. So the fact that it's $40 really doesn't seem that outrageous. It does come with a plethora of different accessories. Now, it is worth mentioning this particular body mod has already been released. This is just with a different style of plastic, so just keep that in mind. But there is definitely quite a bit of value. As I said, online these have already sold out, but if you plan on going to the convention, you should be able to buy these at the booth. NECA will also be rolling out their retro-carded glow-in-the-dark SDCC exclusive Nosferatu action figure. For those people that are not too familiar with what NECA has been doing recently, they decided to roll out this retro-carded line, which is essentially a more basic rendition of their original action figure. For example, we saw this with Frankenstein. We also saw this with the Mummy. They were released in this retro card with no extra accessories, extra hands or head sculpts, and for the most part they are relatively more affordable than their regular releases. They're usually around like $25 to $27, whereas in their regular figures have gone up to about like $35 to $37. So it's roughly about like $10 cheaper. It essentially entices any new collectors that don't want to pay the extra $10 to $12, and it also entices those that want to double dip, because obviously the retro card just displays way better. In my personal opinion, this seems a little bit of a reach from NECA. They always do these like glow in the dark or black and white alternate versions of their characters for San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. For me, it seems like kind of a double dip for them, but if you're really interested, you can actually pick this up at the booth. They have already sold out online, and as I said, it's the exact same figure, just with the glow in the dark effect, and it comes in that beautiful retro card. Next up, we have the TMNT Mirage 40th Anniversary San Diego Comic-Con exclusive 2-pack. These figures are supposed to be based on the characters' first renditions in comic book form. It's definitely not for everybody, and it's interesting that these particular versions are San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. If I had to take a guess, I'm probably going to say that they will eventually re-release these in a different color tone or a different color scheme to be a wider release. They usually make like the alternate color schemes or the black and whites or the glow-in-the-dark rendition specific for the San Diego Comic-Con releases, but in this time it seems like it's reversed. These particular figures will retail for $69.99. They will come with quite a few accessories, and then it's supposed to have like a collector style or a specific packaging for the San Diego Comic-Con event. And by the way, I might have forgotten in terms of the Nosferatu action figure, that one will also be retailing for $29.99, whereas these will be retailing for $69.99. Not really that much of a hike in price. That's usually what you pay with a 2-pack from NECA, so it's nice that they kept that particular price point, especially because you are buying 2 figures and there's just way more added value in terms of accessories and things of that nature. And just to reiterate it, yes, these have all sold out online as far as I'm concerned. They made all of their San Diego Comic-Con pre-orders available, weeks in advance. I'm not sure exactly why they decided to do that, but they did. Now the only way that you can actually pick these up is if you wait for the third-party sellers, or if you're actually there at the event yourself, you can pick these up. Next up, we have the Flash Gordon Wood Beast Challenge Deluxe action figure, and they really mean deluxe. This will include 3 different head sculpts as well as a gigantic tree stump, which honestly, upon taking a closer look, you can really use in a multitude of different ways and in different displays for that matter. You will also be getting the sword as well as a whip and a wood beast. As I said, this is a deluxe figure, and so it will come with that deluxe price point. If you're still interested in picking this up, it will retail at $69.99. Now, as of the moment of this recording, I don't believe there are any actual images of the packaging online, but every single San Diego Comic-Con exclusive figure that NECA has listed so far mentions that it's supposed to have like a special convention packaging. So once we have images of that, I'll probably post it up for the community to see. But like I said, at this point, all they have is like a brief description of like a specific packaging for the San Diego Comic-Con event, where it'll have like a sleeve, you can open it and then just kind of look at the figures from a window or something like that. So like I said, don't have real images at the moment, but they are supposed to be specific to San Diego Comic-Con. Next up, we have the Deluxe Super Elf from NECA. This is one of those really weird properties that I could never really get into as a kid. I know there are people that are diehards that would just bleed themselves dry for an opportunity at this figure, but me personally, I have no attachments. It was one of those weird eras for me where I did not love puppets. I kind of had nightmares about them, so not really my cup of tea, but NECA felt that it was necessary for them to make a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive of Alf, and for this particular figure you will be receiving some alternate hands. It's supposed to have also like a tube of a poster that's supposed to open up. Not only that, he will also include some cloth goods that are tailored specifically to him, as well as a wired cape. And the price point really isn't that bad, considering if you were buying this figure or a normal version of this figure at retail, you would probably be paying somewhere along the lines of like $37.99. So a $40 price point for a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive that will be very limited isn't really that bad. Next up, I thought we would talk a little bit about McFarlane and some of his San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. Now, as of the moment of this recording, I don't believe that there's any price point available for these figures. Not only that, as far as I'm concerned, these will only be available at the convention, or as of the moment of this recording. That might change in the foreseeable future, or there might be kind of a little bit of a curveball where he decides to make a slightly wider release in the future, because McFarlane, he essentially does whatever he wants. So it's really interesting. But as of the moment right now, these will only be available at the convention floor. The first reveal that he had, or the first couple of figures that are going to be available at the convention, will be Bruce Wayne and Ace from the Batman Beyond animated series. Now, these are under the DC Direct line, so these are a little bit different than your normal DC Multiverse line from McFarlane. These are veering closer to like the 1/12 scale, or like the 6-inch scale. The lower half of the body is usually like really thin and really difficult to pose for that reason. Now, what's kind of interesting is that he, at least from what I can remember, he has not done anything with the Batman Beyond franchise at least with the DC Direct. I know the DC Multiverse line, where he veers closer to like the 1/10 or 7-inch line, he has already released some Batman Beyond characters. So I'm not sure exactly why he decided to do that, why he's now doing the DC Direct for Batman Beyond, but he's starting off with Bruce Wayne and Ace, who are, you know, two notable characters, but they're not necessarily like the main ones of the entire series. So I'm not sure if this means that he's now going to start releasing Batman Beyond figures in the DC Direct line, which obviously would be closer to like the 1/12 scale, and then obviously much less articulation, so on and so forth. So that's a really interesting thing to look out for, and it might be kind of a little bit of a turnoff for certain collectors, because a lot of them may already be too deep in the DC Multiverse line, and they may just not be interested in collecting a brand new scale. McFarlane will also have that Superpowers 3-pack, which will feature Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, all in that 4-inch scale with those, like 4 to 5 articulation points, and they're just alternate colors in a really cool sleek box for the San Diego Comic-Con event. It's nothing too crazy, nothing too wild, and so this is just kind of like one of those things where if you're really interested in having something to preserve for the event, you can pick this one up, but I don't think it's a necessarily must own, just because, like I said, it's alternate color, an alternate color palette for figures that have already been widely released. And in some cases, a lot of these were going on sale or on clearance at your local Walmart or Target. So just keep that in mind. But if you're interested in those alternate color schemes, you can pick those up at the convention as well. Next up, we have something that is more in the main line for McFarlane. We're talking about the DC Multiverse, and he is offering an Agent Liberty action figure. As far as I'm concerned, we have not seen this character from the DC Multiverse, at least from McFarlane up to this point. So if you're interested in that particular character, you're now going to be able to pick him up. Granted, it is a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, but I doubt that McFarlane will leave this just as an exclusive. I think eventually we might get an alternate version of this particular character down the line, like a different color scheme. Perhaps. It just doesn't make sense that he would only release this as a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive. Next up, we have the Centennial Park tribute statue. Now, yes, in case you guys are wondering, both the bird as well as the Superman figure are 100% reused, and they're probably just using bronze colored plastic for the actual body mold. So it's a really interesting reuse, but I've said this before, even though this one makes a little bit more sense than his previous gold label action figures, I still don't really get the idea. I still don't get how there's a market for these. I know he was doing a lot of this for like Walmart exclusive gold label action figures, and they were literally just the exact same figure, the exact same accessories, but the entire figure was gold or bronze or whatever the case was. It was just a really boring repaint or reuse from McFarlane. I've said this before, you can reuse torsos and body parts and head sculpts and things of that nature, as long as you're switching it up and keeping it fresh enough for collectors. But this is another perfect example of something that, at least I think in the grand scheme of things, is just a really easy and somewhat lazy reuse for McFarlane. But it is what it is. At least we can bank on the fact that this is just for San Diego Comic-Con. So there isn't a large quantity available. There isn't a factory somewhere having to mass produce these at the highest level. They probably are just going to have like a few hundred available at the floor. And then, like I said, as far as I'm concerned, there is no information regarding this, but I don't think that they will be made available. At least some of these won't be made available through any online retailers. These are just going to be available at the con. I will say this is one of the things that McFarlane, and I've mentioned this previously, he's falling a little bit behind on, because a lot of the news has been coming out very slowly from McFarlane. So we don't have like all of the information at the moment. It seems like he's just kind of sprinkling out. He threw the images out, what figures were going to be there, but then he didn't attach the price points. And then also we don't know if these will only be exclusive to the event, or will they be made eventually online somehow. So only time will tell, but as of the moment, you can only get these at the convention floor. Beast Kingdom will also have some really cool San Diego Comic-Con exclusives, very similar to a lot of the other OMs. They're usually just different color paints or different shades or different effects to their plastic. Now, their pre-orders as of this moment are still available online. I'm not sure if they will be able to fulfill all of the orders because usually when any other OM tends to throw up their SDCC exclusive stuff, it usually sells out incredibly quickly. But at least for Beast Kingdom, their pre-orders are still available as of this moment. You have the Lord of the Rings Dark Lord Sauron. Now, don't quote me on this because I don't really collect Beast Kingdoms, but if I had to take a guess, or just looking at some promotional images from the past, I think this is just a different shade on the actual figure. I'm not 100% sure, don't quote me on that, but I'm just taking a guess here. It will come with a couple of extra interchangeable hands, as well as a mace. Now, if I remember correctly, these figures usually veer closer to like the 1/10 scale, so closer to what you get with like NECA or McFarlane. Sometimes they're a little bit bigger. This figure is supposed to stand at about 29 centimeters. But for example, if you're looking to purchase one of their DC characters, they're usually about like 8 inches. So they're a little bit bigger, or they scale a little bit bigger than McFarlane. But they're supposed to be, I think, a little bit over the 1/10 scale, just so you guys can get an idea of how big these figures are. They're usually really well sculpted. They pay a lot of attention to detail, and their articulation is pretty decent. Now, I'm not 100% sure why they never put the exact amount of articulation points, but at least from the description, this is supposed to have over 24 points of articulation. So it has a pretty good range of motion for a figure that is really big and hefty. Next up, there will be a Rick and Morty, both of them SDCC exclusives, and I'm assuming the only real differences is that these are glow-in-the-dark action figures. With the Rick figure, you will be getting 3 head sculpts altogether, a portal gun, 5 interchangeable hand options, and an upgraded laser gun. Now, the lab coat for Rick is supposed to have like a real fabric texture to it, so I'm assuming it's some sort of like cloth good. Now with Morty, you are also getting 3 head sculpts altogether, as well as 4 interchangeable hand options, 3 test tubes, the Pickle Rick, as well as mind blowers. Now these figures are a little bit more limited in terms of range of motion compared to the Sauron figure. These will only have about 16 points of articulation compared to Sauron, which I believe it had over 24 points. So it's definitely a much more articulated figure than the Rick and Morty action figures. The Sauron figure is going for $110, whereas both the Rick and Morty figures are going for about $60 each. They're also doing an alternate color scheme for the Michael Keaton Batman, which they already had previously released. This one will come with a cloth cape, a total of 4 interchangeable hand types. According to the listing, it will have 20 different points of articulation, and I'll be brutally honest, I'm not a huge fan of the color scheme, but it is very vibrant, it is very bright, and it is very metallic. So if this is your style, and if you're into San Diego Comic-Con exclusives from Beast Kingdom, you can now pre-order this for a grand total of $110. Moving on to potentially my favorite OM of the year, we are taking a look at Jada Toys. Now they are offering 3 San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. The first one being the Chester Cheetah action figure, and from my understanding, this is just like a glow-in-the-dark iteration. They already released this figure, I believe maybe like a year ago. This is much closer to what we expect when it comes down to San Diego Comic-Con exclusives. They usually are just like alternate versions of something that already exists. It's something cool. You can actually pick this up at the booth. This will run you $29.99, and as of the moment of this recording, you can actually pre-order this on Entertainment Earth, so you can actually get that action figure. Even though it's exclusive to the event itself, you can actually pick this one up as well. Next up, we're looking at the Violent Ken San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Jada Toys action figure. This is really interesting. I personally do not have the Ken action figure yet. I only have the original 3 from the first wave, which was Fei Long, Ryu, and Chun-Li. That's it. But this is a really interesting take on it. It's supposed to have an exclusive head sculpt, an angry head sculpt, and then it's going to have some extra Dio pieces compared to the original version. This one will also be available for $39.99 at the respective booth. Now, at the moment of this recording, this hasn't been made available online, or there's really no information on how you should be able to purchase it, but according to multiple different sources, there will be a small amount or a small quantity available at a few online retailers. It seems like Entertainment Earth is probably your best bet, so definitely stay tuned for that. that information. Next up, we have that pink deluxe Chun-Li. Now, from at least from the description that I could read, this is going to come with like a couple of extra accessories, and I believe like an alternate head sculpt that is only for this particular set, which is really interesting because, like I already mentioned, most OMs don't really do that. But you will get that alternate color scheme on her, or the alternate uniform, a new head sculpt, and this should be retailing around $35 at the booth. And then, like I said, it will be made available at a few online retailers. Now, before you start pulling out your eyebrows and your nose hairs, because I know there are a lot of people out there that absolutely hate Funko Pops, and I completely get it. I don't necessarily collect them anymore. I might pick up one here or there if I find a chase. But I felt compelled to at least talk about a couple of these San Diego Comic-Con exclusive Funko Pop figures. I'm clearly not going to be able to cover every single one, but I'll talk about some of the highlights or some of the ones that popped out to me the most. Let's start off with this Elmo Funko Pop with Rocco. I'll be brutally honest with you guys, I haven't collected Funko Pops consistently for years now, and I didn't even know they had a Sesame Street Funko Pop line. I think it's really cool. It's nostalgic, and Funko does a phenomenal job of always finding those really good nostalgia pulls, and this is just a perfect example of that. There are probably like God knows how many different collectors that grew up watching Sesame Street. This is just a perfect Funko Pop if you're, you know, a human being and had a childhood, I guess. They're also supposed to be doing a Mr. Sinister Funko Pop, which I think is perfect, very relevant considering we just got the newest season for the animated 97 series. We are also getting a Spider-Boy Funko Pop. Again, really cool, especially considering this is probably one of the hottest comic book characters in quite some time. He had his first appearance, I believe, like a year ago, and the first appearance comic book was just flying off the shelves. If I'm not mistaken, even like non-ratio comic book covers were going for ridiculous prices. I think like $80 right out of the gate, which is really crazy for a first appearance. We're also supposed to be getting a Kermit from the Muppets, which is yet another big nostalgia tug. I'm not sure if this is like the first version of him in Funko form. I'm assuming not, but again, a really cool nod to our childhood. We are also supposed to be getting a Godzilla Funko Pop, and this one I might have seen at like FYE, so I'm going to assume that this is just like a different shade. I think there's like a green wash on it. Still really cool if you're a big Godzilla fan, especially considering the property at the moment is probably at an all-time high. And then lastly, we are supposed to be getting an Edma Mode from The Incredibles. Probably one of the most notable characters on there. Is the one that kind of stuck out the most to me. I don't know why. It was just, she's just one of those memorable characters in The Incredibles. Like I said, I don't know if this is the perfect, or I should say the first appearance of her in Funko Pop form, but still a really cool one if you're into the Disney line in terms of Funko Pop. So there you guys have it. I'm not going to go through every single Funko Pop. I'll throw some images up there. I'll kind of let it roll if you guys are interested. But if you guys are attending the convention, just know that I am extremely jealous because I wish I was going out there. But if you guys are, definitely enjoy it. Hit all the booths that you possibly can because they are definitely offering some absolute heaters this year. And not just an action figure form, but they also offer a ton of exclusive comic book covers. And then obviously you have like the big announcements, whether it's movies or video games. They usually make some pretty big announcements at these type of events. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you guys are at home, definitely stay tuned because these should be popping up at different online retailers. So, you know, hit up social media, things of that nature. Stay tuned. Keep your head to the ground because there is quite a bit to keep track of, and these usually sell out incredibly quickly. So if you're able to get some, thank your lucky stars because most of us will probably just be drooling at home on our computer. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. This was definitely an absolute task to put together. I don't think we've ever made a video this long, but you know, I was up to the challenge, and hopefully you guys enjoyed as much as I enjoyed putting this together. So stay safe out there. Stay tuned. We do upload quite a bit of action figure news and content, and hopefully you guys continue to enjoy the hobby. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next one.